Have you ever found yourself in a moment of panic in the kitchen, wondering if that innocent slip means you have to discard your lovingly prepared kosher meal? It is a common concern for anyone striving to maintain a kosher home. When kosher food comes into contact with non-kosher items, its status depends on several key factors, primarily the temperature of both items, their material, and the type of contact. Generally, if cold kosher food touches cold non-kosher food or an item, the kosher food can often be saved after careful assessment. However, if hot kosher food comes into contact with anything non-kosher, especially another hot item, the kosher food usually becomes non-kosher. The core principle guiding these rules is known as bala, which means absorption. When hot food or liquid touches another substance, the flavor, or ta'am, is absorbed. If the absorbed flavor is non-kosher, it renders the kosher food non-kosher. Conversely, cold contact is less problematic because absorption of flavor is minimal to non-existent without heat. This principle applies to everything from cookware to countertops, dictating how we manage cross-contamination. To address these situations, first assess the temperature. Was anything hot involved? If both items were cold, you can often remove the outer layer or surface of the kosher food that made contact. For example, if a cold kosher slice of cheese accidentally touched a non-kosher plate, you would simply remove a thin layer of the cheese. If a significant amount of cold non-kosher food spilled onto cold kosher food, or if the kosher food is porous like bread, it is generally considered non-kosher and should be discarded to avoid any doubt. However, if any heat was involved during the contact, especially if the non-kosher item was hot or the kosher food was hot and came into contact with a non-kosher item, the kosher food is typically no longer kosher. Understanding these nuances helps you navigate kitchen mishaps with confidence, knowing when a simple adjustment is sufficient and when a food item must be respectfully discarded. For instance, if a knife used for non-kosher meat is mistakenly used to cut a kosher vegetable, if the knife and vegetable were both cold, the vegetable typically needs to have a thin slice removed from where the knife touched it. However, if the knife was hot from recent use, the entire vegetable would be considered non-kosher. This concept of nat bar nat, flavor of a flavor, further explains that even if a kosher food absorbs a non-kosher flavor that itself is a secondary absorbed flavor, it can still affect the kosher status. By remembering the crucial role of temperature in flavor absorption and applying the simple guidelines for cold versus hot contact, you gain the practical wisdom to safeguard your kosher kitchen. This knowledge helps you confidently differentiate between a minor issue that can be rectified and a situation that genuinely compromises the kosher integrity of your food, ensuring peace of mind and faithful observance.
If you love kosher living, like, subscribe, and join our table.